everybody. It's Allison Williams here, your law firm mentor. Law Firm Mentor is a business coaching service for solo and small law firm attorneys. We help you grow your revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. Hi, everybody. It's Allison Williams here, your law firm mentor. And today's episode of the podcast is dedicated to the topic of adding a new practice area to your law firm. So I've been really excited to see a lot of lawyers talking about the opportunities that were created by COVID. And we know a lot of lawyers did not do well during COVID. A lot of the legal profession was in retraction, but a lot of the legal profession actually exploded in growth as a result of the legal ramifications of quarantine and all that it did for our society, both positive and negative. And so now a lot of lawyers are contemplating seizing upon those opportunities by virtue of adding different practice areas. And so now that the world has started to lift the mask mandates across the United States, and because we are starting to see an opening up of our economy, I wanted to give some time and some attention to the topic of adding a new practice area, because a lot of people simply don't know even where to start before contemplating what to do with adding a new practice area. So there are 3 criteria that we're going to talk about today that you need to consider before adding a new practice area to your law firm. All right, so criteria number 1 is that unless it is your passion and you have ample free time and ample excessive money, meaning ample reserves in your law firm, you really should not do it yourself. Okay. That means you should not be the one who goes out and learns how to be America's next top estate planning attorney if you are a family law attorney. Or you, the immigration law firm attorney, should not suddenly decide, hey, we want to get into real estate and I'll go learn how to do that. There's lots of reasons why you shouldn't do that. So first of all, we want to make sure that you're always in a place of creating from what you have. And that doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing over and over again. You can absolutely grow and be fluid and add different things. But if it's not your passion and you go put yourself back into the mode of trying to learn something new and you create that something new in the economies of your existing law firm, you create a lot of challenges that are unnecessary, right? So the first thing you always have to consider is that if you don't have the time, if you don't have the ample time to study the practice area, to go to the CLEs, to have the conversations with attorneys in that practice area, to actually start to expand in that area, to learn the systems, to get the retainer and letter of engagement, the letter of disengagement or declining a client. If you don't know the ethics decisions that govern this practice area, what tends to happen is there is so much risk created that either you avoid the risk and are never aware of it. So then when something happens, you don't know that it's a risk. So God forbid, you're just kind of like bopping on along and you're like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. And poof, you have an ethics issue. Or you're aware that it's a risk and you're so terrified by it that the quality of what you're able to do for a client is hamstrung by all of the risk mitigation that you're putting into that practice area. In other words, you can't be your best self when you are walking on pins and needles. That's part of the reason why it tends to be better for someone who's actually practiced a little bit to start a law firm versus someone who hangs a shingle on day 1 and immediately has to eat. Right. So nothing wrong with hanging a shingle on day 1, but if you're hanging a shingle and you got to make rent from whatever you sell, you don't really have the time to become expert enough to give that high level service and to get yourself paid. So it's kind of the same thing here, right? That's part of the reason why we say if you don't have excess money, if you don't have enough money sitting around that your primary practice area is grooving and cooking and it's doing what it's doing, and without you changing a single thing, the work comes in, the clients pay the bills, the money is there, and you have money left over, then you can go practice in a new area without being reliant upon what you earn there, right? Now, this typically means that you have to have a large enough firm, at least 2 attorneys, but certainly more than that is typical, so that you can stop practicing in the primary area and not lose any productivity in the primary area. Right. So in other words, if I'm a family law attorney and I generate $700,000 a year off of 2 attorneys, if I suddenly stop practicing family law and I'm the owner of the firm, well, that could cost me $300,000 or $400,000. Right. So if I'm over here in estate planning world Yeah, I might enjoy it. I might love it. I might be soaking up the rays of this new practice area, but I have decimated the income of my firm. Or what is much more common, you don't stop practicing family law, but instead of producing $300,000 or $400,000, maybe you only produce 200,000 or 300,000, and you presume that the rest is going to come from estate planning. But then you're spending your time marketing that practice, getting to know that practice at the same time, right? So you're in a state of push and pull, pulling yourself out of your primary area, pulling yourself toward the new area, but not quite knowing where the rubber meets the road. In other words, where you can stop doing the primary and start doing the new thing without there being an economic consequence. So usually lawyers are risk averse. We tend to be afraid of losing revenue in the primary area. So we ended up just tacking on that extra learning time to our weekends, to our evenings. Maybe when we're having a light load in our primary area, we start learning a little bit more of something else. And the challenge there becomes that we start adding the stress of learning the new area and the economic need of the new area while we're still doing the old area, right? So it just doesn't make for the best practice model of what we create, or likely the best result for the client. So you should really be careful. And strategy number one is to make sure that if it's not your passion and you don't have ample free time and money, you really need to bring in someone else or cultivate someone else from inside your firm to be handling that practice area. It should not be you as chief, lawyer, cook, bottle washer, and law firm owner. All right. Strategy number two, you want to choose a rising star attorney for your department. Okay. So whatever the new practice area is going to be, there's a couple of different types of people you don't want to import into this practice area. Okay. You don't want to get the mediocre struggling solo. Okay. Now I'm using struggling solo. Obviously, this is a podcast for solo and small law firm attorneys. So please, solos, don't get mad at me. I am not denigrating solos because I once was one. Okay. This is not to say all solos are struggling, but there are those struggling solos. We know who they are, right? They're very nice people, but they couldn't work for someone else. They wanted to work on their own. They're very nice, but they're kind of the Eeyore of our profession, right? I'm talking about Eeyore from Pooh's Corner, if you guys don't know who Eeyore is, right? They're that soft, lazy, soft-spoken kind of donkey of the profession in the sense of the energy and tenacity that they bring to the practice, right? If they're alive and thriving and hustling and moving forward and advancing, and they just happen to want to join a law firm, there could be any number of reasons for that. We certainly don't look down on people who don't enjoy being an entrepreneur. It's not for everyone. But for the people that are in a solo position because they really can't do anything else, you don't want that person joining your law firm, right? The person who was bad working for someone else, who kind of either was fired into being a solo or chose to be a solo because they thought they could do a better job at it, and turns out that they can't. And now they're looking to escape being a solo so they can go back to being a mediocre employee. That person you don't want to add. That person will add risk to your law firm because they don't have a passion and a tenacity around creating the systems, creating the structure, organizing it, profitizing it. They're not going to make it into something big for yourself. Now, the second thing to consider is that you don't want to add a rock star. Okay. So you might say, well, why on earth would I not want a rock star? That person that comes in with a big book of business and a lot of energy and is excited to build something. Why would I not want that person in my law firm? And the answer is for the same reason why you don't want a highly entrepreneurial associate in your law firm, right? If a person has too much of a desire to do it on their own, you are more likely to be a stepping stone, right? And there's oftentimes in these relationships, something that is not stated that is causing a person to choose to apply to work with you or talk to you up in the courthouse and kind of work their way into a conversation where they can work with you. That rock star oftentimes has been practicing for long enough that he or she is at the top of their game, right? They bring cachet, they bring reputation, they bring status, they bring money. Great, all wonderful things. The challenge there, though, is that person who brought all those things and has that great status on their own tends to want to keep it on their own. And if they don't want to keep it on their own, it's usually because they're either not a good business person. So they're going to bring the bad numbers associated with the practice to your firm instead of keeping it with their own. Or they are good with business, but there's some reason why right now is not the time for them to be solo. So it's like, all right, I'll come to your firm and I'll sit and get comfortable for a minute. And then when I don't know, regenerate my psychological energy, or when my wife is no longer sick, or when my child's special needs have been remediated through health insurance and surgeries and what have you, or when I have saved up enough money to be able to get into an office building that I want, I'll leave. Now, for those of you that have listened to me for any length of time, you've heard me say, we don't make decisions from our fear, right? So I'm not suggesting to you to be wary of any successful person and say, well, why would they ever choose me? They must be faking it until they can get something better. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're really talking about here is the person who is at such a height in the profession that there isn't anything to induce them to want to work with you that they don't already have. In which case, they're just getting more of what you have to offer. Now, that doesn't mean that what you have to offer isn't so sexy to them that they're not like, wow, I would love to, have a full department, a full accounting department in order to be successful in the law. Or I would love to have associates and I don't have an associate and I don't have time to go hire one, or I don't know how to hire one, or I've never hired well, right? So it could be that belief system as well. You certainly can have things to add of value, but the rock star tends to be at the height of their profession, and they also tend to have a higher ticket associated with that. And while I am all for hiring people, paying them well, giving them the compensation that they earn, but also being generous so that they not just get the economic benefit of what you give them, but they get that extra value that comes with it. Right. They get that extra sense of, wow, I'm doing really well by coming here. There is something to be said for, if you bring a person in at the height of their career, they have to be immensely profitable from day one. Versus if you hire the rising star, maybe they're 8 to 10 years out. They're at what would otherwise be the partnership level if they were at a large or a mid-sized firm, but they didn't make it for whatever reason, or they didn't choose to be a mid-sized firm or whatever. Wherever they are in their career, there is another step up that they have as the inducement to come join your firm, right? That way, when you add your business acumen and you can help them to market up a practice, they see immediate economic benefit because they're coming to work for you and you'll pay them well, but they also see the opportunity for more. So they have an incentive to utilize your landscape, your resources, your reputation, the things you have already created, to advance them in their lives. And that advancement brings them more so that they see that it's a win-win, right? Your goal with the rising star is to get them to the win-win. You get a person who knows what they're doing, who can build out the systems and the infrastructure and all of the things that you need for the business. But you also get to have someone who is going to be with you to step it up to the next level. Okay, so the third and final consideration for when you want to add a new practice area to your law firm is that when you meet with people, right? So you find that rising star, you've got that person who's in it to win it, wants to come, wants to build, can create all the systems, the structure, talk to you about how to monetize it, how to get the efficiencies into your practice, all the things that you need to have a sustainable, growing law firm that runs without you, right? Because we don't deviate from that simply because we're adding a new practice area. We might take a break from it while you're building out some of the systems and structure, but you still want to ultimately be working toward the law firm that runs without you. When we are working with that person, we find that person, or who we think might be that person, we want to talk about money right away. Okay, so strategy number 3 is to talk about money right away. Now, some of you might be averse to talking about money and might not feel comfortable raising it right away. But I highly recommend that the very first conversation that you have is not a long conversation over lunch. It's not a detailed dive into all of your values, all of your systems, how big you want to grow. It's not all of that. Because the reality is, if the numbers don't work, it's not worth your time or, frankly, theirs to go deep into the weeds here. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to create an impression that you are seeking them, right? I want you to think about this. Now, this may sound a little manipulative. It's not designed to be that, but you want to think about how you want to structure this relationship. And you want to think about the idea of bringing a person and or a practice into your law firm, into the highly systematized, highly structured, highly profitable machine that you are creating. And by the way, for those of you that have not created that machine, you can always reach out to Law Firm Mentor. That's what we help our clients to do. So when I'm talking about how we are going to address this particular issue, it's from the same perspective that I address all issues, which is that law firm owners should be creating highly systematized businesses that have repeated, recurring, predictable revenue that allows you ample free time so that the law firm runs without you. Okay. And if the numbers don't work, you can't evolve fast enough in order for this to be a viable relationship. Because if it's a new practice area and you're not intimately familiar with the numbers of the new practice area, what tends to happen, now this is not universal, there are some highly, highly entrepreneurial lawyers out there that on a wing and a prayer will bring in a person, bring in a department and make it work, right? So I'm not saying that it can't happen. But what tends to happen is if you don't know the practice area and the metrics and the numbers, you're often relying upon this new person and whatever their skill set is and whatever their knowledge base is in order to get you there. And so if talking to the person yields you numbers that don't make sense or don't leave you enough profit to really be able to monetize and grow the department, then what ends up happening is you bring in struggle to your business, right? So I remember one time I was having a conversation with a lawyer about bringing a practice area to my law firm. And this person had a book of business of about $300,000 a year. And they indicated to me that they took home about $250,000. And I thought, wow, $50,000 is all that it takes to run your practice. And I live in New Jersey. I think we are the second or third most expensive state. We somewhat where there's always like a bobble in terms of New York, California, and New Jersey, somewhere in there, right? We're never number one, but we sometimes are number two, sometimes number three, depending on the economic factors that are measured. But I was thinking $50,000 to run a practice in this area seems really low. And then I thought about it and we continue to have the conversation. And what I realized is that this person practices very differently than I do, right? So while I want to have profit and I want to pay people well, I also have created a firm that allows for a certain level of convenience because my primary practice area necessitates that. It's family law. I don't want my family law attorneys, after dealing with the emotions of our clients, the stress of having ever present everyday deadlines, dealing with the pressures of how the court system treats our bar, all of the things that come with being a family lawyer. I don't want them delivering papers to the courthouse. I don't want them stuffing envelopes and metering their own mail. I don't want them picking up the phone every time the phone rings. There's a lot that goes into creating enough team and a high quality team so that the fabric of what they do is focused on the lawyering and not other things. And other practice areas, you might not need that, right? There are some practice areas that are really not that stressful. In fact, I remember when I first started practicing, the law firm that I worked at had an area of municipal practice. And when I got sent to municipal court, you go in, you hang out with the lawyers for a while, you talk to the prosecutor, you negotiate for 5 minutes, and then you go on the record like 10, 15 minutes later and put it on the record and you're done, right? There was nothing that was ever stressful about that experience. I liked the client. The client didn't have the highest stakes at issue. Now, we're not talking about DWIs. I wasn't trying DWIs from the time we started. But, traffic tickets, local ordinance violations, that kind of stuff, right? That stuff wasn't particularly cumbersome. So for me, if I had a full practice in that, I could easily see stuffing my own envelopes and making my own copies or dropping things off at the courthouse, because the rest of my time would be spent doing work that was, yes, legally of value to people, but it wouldn't require the same level of intensity and stress as if I had done something else. Now, this is not in any way to denigrate that practice area. We need those lawyers as much as we need family lawyers, as much as we need anything else, but they're different practice areas. So they have a different need for team and different expenses than associated with team. So I could imagine, based on this lawyer's practice area, that they would be able to keep their costs down. And to some degree, I questioned whether they were really keeping them as far down as it seemed like, or if maybe they were cutting corners in some areas where, just as a way of practice, I would not agree with. But when the person told me those numbers and ultimately said, well, I would want to at least keep my same salary if I came to work for you, there were some immediate issues there, because based on what she was paying her team member, I would immediately raise that person's salary. And that person coming into my office would have access to our benefits package, which is substantial. And that person would have to have a certain amount of training that would go into the budget, right? So there would be additional costs associated with their team, if nothing else. And if I paid the person what the person wanted to make and what the person was making on their own, and paid their team member what was necessary to facilitate the work in the way that the person was used to, I would not be able to have enough money left over to receive any benefit from having the person in my office, right? And just having another practice area on the letterhead was not sufficient for me. It might be sufficient for other people, right? Because some people, the impression of increase, the impression of growing, right? We talk about the impression of increase from the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles in chapter 14, in particular, the impression of increase, i.e. that people want what is already growing and evolving. So the more you put out that you are growing and evolving, the more you attract people and opportunity to you because of that growth. For some people, that would be the stage where they would actually receive a value. So they'd say, I'm okay foregoing profit right now, so I can step myself up into having more bodies, more opportunities, more practice areas, the impression of more. But I already had a multi-million-dollar law firm by the time I entertained the conversation. And I said, well, I don't need more in order to create more. I can simply create more because I already have a lot to start with, right? So you have to think about those things, pragmatically speaking. But when you're adding a new practice area, just by way of summary, we always want to make sure that unless it's your passion and you've got plenty of time and money, that you're not the one doing the work, that you're going to add a rising star to your practice in order to get that work done. And most importantly, that you're going to have conversations with people about joining your firm, talking about money first, so you don't waste your time, you don't waste their time, and ultimately you can get to a place of saying this is a viable solution before you start getting into the weeds of what it looks like. All right, everyone. I am Allison Williams, your law firm mentor. You've been listening to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. And if you have questions about how you can strategically grow your law firm, either with a partnership or on your own, reach out to us. We can always help you with that. We help both solo and small law firm attorneys, and we have had many partnerships come through our doors and ultimately grow their businesses in partnership together. All right, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, your law firm mentor, and tune in next week to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. To learn more about today's guest and take advantage of the resources mentioned, check out our show notes. And if you own a solo or small law firm and are looking for guidance, advice, or simply support on your journey to create a law firm that runs without you, join us in the Law Firm Mentor Movement free Facebook group. There, you can access our free trainings on improving collections in law firms, meeting billable hours, and join the movement of thousands of law firm owners across the country who want to crush chaos in their law firms and make more money. I'm Allison Williams, your law firm mentor. Have a great day.